So we have the latest headlines out of Iowa saying that Mayor Pete Buttigieg wins most Iowa delegates after the party reviews the caucus. Of course, that was a very messy result coming from Iowa. Yeah. We know that Pete Buttigieg is riding high, entering New Hampshire. How are things looking over there?
Okay, so first of all, as you said, we don't seem able to get past Iowa. We still don't know exactly what happened in Iowa, but as you just said, it turns out now that Pete Buttigieg has 2 more delegates coming out of Iowa than, in fact, Bernie Sanders has. That's a pickup of 1. So now here we are in New Hampshire with a lot of polls. Polls are coming out pretty much every day. The polls indicate, on average, that Bernie Sanders is in the lead, but Pete Buttigieg, again, is nipping at his heels to only 3, 4, 5% behind, and then followed by Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden in 4th position. Joe Biden is sort of positioning it so that, you know, he didn't expect to do that well in Iowa or New Hampshire, wait till South Carolina. But there's a lot of question about how badly can he do and really keep this whole campaign going for himself.
So what does this mean for Joe Biden, as you said? Because his performance in Iowa was not that great. So how significant would New Hampshire be? And just for our viewers in Asia, put this into context. Why is Iowa or New Hampshire important?
Well, it's a very good question, Shery, and we have to ask that here in the United States, much less people in Asia. I mean, there are about 3 million people in the state of Iowa. There's 1.35 million people in the state of New Hampshire. The state of New Hampshire has had the first primary for a long time, not a caucus, a primary. They actually have a statute that says they have to have the first primary. It's really sort of a cottage industry here, but it's one of the first real tests. It also is a little bit like Iowa, maybe more so, retail politicking, where the candidates really have to go out and visit with the individual voters. They get to know them pretty well, and it's the first one out. But we have to put it in perspective. It is a small state and also a very homogeneous state. Like Iowa, there's not a lot of diversity in the state of New Hampshire, which is something that actually former Vice President Biden is emphasizing, because he says he can appeal to a more diverse audience, and that's what the Democrats are going to have to do in November.
David, in terms of the laggards coming out of Iowa, have we seen a reallocation or a redirection of what they're focusing on, spending, ad spending, for example?
Well, certainly money matters in politics in the United States, and particularly matters in terms of ad buys and other social media and things like that. By all accounts, Joe Biden, the former vice president, is struggling a bit. He's in 4th place as well, perhaps, in the money he has to spend. Bernie Sanders doing terribly well, $25 million he raised in the month of January alone. And Pete Buttigieg also is doing quite well with a lot of money coming in. And so we're seeing them pull back, Joe Biden, for example, pull back, Elizabeth Warren pull back with some of the ad buys in some of the locations like South Carolina and Nevada. So it's critically important. And the 2 are interrelated because, as a practical matter, if you think about it, do you really want to write a check to a candidate if you're not sure they're going to make it? If they don't do particularly well in the primaries, you have to raise a question, are they going to make it?
David, what was your assessment following the debate over the weekend? Was there a sense that there were stronger performers than others?
Well, you know, it's in the eye of the beholder. People should judge for themselves. I've heard from a lot of people that thought that Amy Klobuchar did a particularly strong job. She's a pretty good debater. She's pretty effective at that. I think the main thing that we got out of the debates, but also over the weekend, is these Democratic candidates are more inclined now to really take one another on pretty directly. They're really drawing a lot of distinctions, and particularly, for example, again, coming back to Joe Biden, really trying to draw a distinction with Pete Buttigieg, saying you're no Barack Obama. And he actually has an ad out now that is pretty direct about Pete Buttigieg and what he did as mayor as opposed to what the vice president did as vice president.
David, we have seen President Trump's approval rating now coming at the highest ever. We know that he was acquitted in the impeachment trial. How strong is his position going into the 2020 race?
Well, right now, and things can change from here into November, I would have to say it's quite strong, because we have to remember most of the time people vote their pocketbooks, and the U.S. economy is doing well. We had those jobs numbers on Friday. We've had various indications. And bring that back to New Hampshire for a moment. There essentially is almost no unemployment in New Hampshire. The problem they have right now is they don't have enough skilled workers. So it's really hard to say we've suffered on it. And in fact, New Hampshire has done better in GDP growth actually than the rest of the country.